Hello, everybody. Good evening and good day to everyone, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. I hope you're all doing great. Today, we discuss history, we discuss world and Indian history. And I have selected a large number of questions that you have asked in the comments, and I'll take as many of those as possible today. Before we do that, as always, let us see who all is there on the live chat. I can see Krishna of the Surinamese Netherlands, Vikash PJ, namaste. Sukun Vacher, hello. TS 67, GK GS1KE, Crazy Brain, hello. Geopolitical Dubai is here from Indore, good evening. Animals for Laugh is here from Mumbai. Real Painter, all hail to you as well. Somi is here from Jaipur. Vidhi Manyar, thank you, ma'am, good to see you. Tanmay Desh Pandey, TS, okay, GKGS, okay. Vikash PJ, Sona Sandhuji from Chandigarh, hello. A real painter is here. Who else? Sumit Agarwal, Ram Ram. Sumit, Mehul Rajesh Babu, Somi, MAK4J. Ankita Kachap is here. Good evening. Rocket EJ, Advait Ashwani, Ayush Singh is here. Pranam, Pranam. Sagar Ghare is here from Bangalore. Om Naik is here. Tanmay, once again. Event countdown 1, 2, 3. Hello. Manisha Cardoso, namaste, namaste. Devanam Priyadashi. Okay, good to see you. Vikash PJ, Sukun Vacher. Who else do we have? Surajit Acharya is here. Nutan Roshan, Somalia Paul from West Bengal. Who else? Aryan Rocking Gaming 6950. Nutan Roshan, Namaskaram. Surajit Acharya. Om Naik. Red John 03. Good to see you, Red John 03. And everybody else. So I'm trying an experiment streaming in two different aspect ratios. If you are used to the the horizontal one, you can see in that one. If you want to see on a cell phone, then you can see the vertical one. It's up to you. It's not like I'm forcing one aspect ratio on everybody. We have two aspect ratios being streamed on at the same time on YouTube, and I'm also streaming on Twitter and wherever else, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Kik, etc., Twitch, and so on. Okay, so let's get going with the questions. What questions do we have? All right, let us go. What questions? Let me quickly check the questions. Here we go. What is the first question that we have today? And that is by Amisha Mishra. Do you agree that the term South Asian was invented to erase the legacy and history of what has for centuries been known as Indian civilization? See, the term South Asia was invented by the US State Department. At least it was popularized and brought into the mainstream by the US State Department. Maybe the term was used before that, but it's when the State Department starts pushing it, somewhere in the 1950s, 1960s onwards, that the term South Asia becomes commonplace. And today, Indians use the term South Asia without understanding what it means. We even have the SARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. Why do we have to, accept this term South Asia? So, why has this term been invented, and what is the point of it all? So if you want to understand that, let me put this image on screen that will explain in great clarity what the intention of this is. And I don't take credit for this graphic. It is credit where it is due. It was created by somebody called Strider EL. So this is a strategic guide on the usage of the term South Asia in Western media, in academia, and so on. This is more about Western media. So, what kind of news do we have? If it is good news, okay, and the country of origin of the good news is Pakistan, then the Western media will use the term Pakistan. They will not say South Asia. If there is good news, but it's coming from India, they will use the term South Asia, not India. If there is bad news that's coming out of Pakistan, they will say South Asia, not Pakistan. And if there is bad news coming out of India, then they will say India, not South Asia. So South Asia is used to erase the existence of India when there is something good that you want to speak about that comes out from the subcontinent. Indian subcontinent, right? And if there's something bad that's happening, then you use the term South Asia. For example, in the UK, you have these Pakistani gangs who prey on girls and women, right? And that's a well-known scandal. I don't know how many tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of girls have been victimized by these Pakistani monsters. So what term do they use for this? They use the term Asian gangs or maybe South Asian gangs. They never use the term Pakistani gangs, right? So they want to make people believe that even Indians are included in this when something bad is going on. So when something bad happens, use the term South Asia, don't use the term Pakistan, even though most bad things come out of Pakistan. And when something good is going on, which is coming from Pakistan, then don't use the term South Asia, use Pakistan. When something good happens from India, use the term South Asia to include everybody else. Even when it comes to history, the history of the subcontinent is Indian history. It's not Pakistani history or Bangladeshi history. It's Indian history. The entire subcontinent was India before the 1940s, right? But once again, to erase the Indian identity of our history and civilization, they use the term South Asia. So it is a deliberate ploy to erase our history, our culture, our civilization. And whenever something bad happens that comes from India, they'll use India. Otherwise, they'll use the term South Asia and so on. So that is why they're doing it. And so what should we do about this? What we should do is we should reject the term South Asia. Stop using the term South Asia. Use the term Indian subcontinent. That is the correct term. The term Indian subcontinent includes all of what they call South Asia, right? Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Maldives. It can also include Burma and Persia, depending on how you want to use it. But if you want to exclude Burma and Persia, that's fine. But the rest of the subcontinent is part of that. So use the term Indian subcontinent, never use the term South Asia. All right, great question. Next question is by Shubh and Subhojit Karmakar. Why did Persians never try to invade India? Was it because of a cultural reason or because of powerful Indian empires? Did they lack the strategy of fighting against Indian war elephants? And Shubhojit says, the more I study about Persia and its link with ancient India, the more it feels like an extension of the Western Indian population like Gujaratis, Hindi, Balochi. DNA is similar, language is pretty close, even the surnames end in similar tones. If that's the case, did Bharatvarsh actually stretch from Persia to Bengal and the Pamirs to Sri Lanka? Maybe Persia with time became too big in its own right to be called just an extension. If that's the case, what prevented other distant parts like Bengal, Tamil Nadu, etc. from becoming separate cultural entities during the same time period? Okay, so what's the deal with Persia? Is it an extension of India? Was it actually part of Bharatvarsh? Did Bharatvarsh stretch from Persia to Bengal and Pamirs to Sri Lanka? Is that the case? Well, what is the origin of Persia? That's what we have to ask ourselves. What's the origin? Now, if you study your standard history textbooks, the colonial history textbooks, which even today, when it comes to dealing with Indian history, they have all these colonial baggage that they carry. The Aryan invasion theory, which is now transformed into an Aryan migration theory, but the same premise, right? So according to that theory, they will say that India and the Indian and Iranian people, they had the same ancestry, and then they were part of the Aryan invaders. One branch split off and went into Iran, and one branch split off and came into the subcontinent. That's the story. So even the colonial version of history will tell you that India and Persia have the same ancestors and same original history. Now, the truth is that there was no Aryan invasion or migration or tourism or picnic. That's a lie, and that's going to be debunked. And I have spoken in detail about that, so I will not go into that. The origin of Persia can be understood when you study the Rig Veda, and one episode or one event that's mentioned in the Rig Veda, which is the Battle of the Ten Kings. The Battle of the Ten Kings. And King Sudas wins the battle against more than 10 kings who are arrayed against him. And the losing confederation of kings and clans are expelled out of India. They are expelled exiled permanently out of India. They go westwards and northwards out of India. And one of the clans was the Parshva clan. Parshva. And that name comes from the battle axe, which is called Parshu in Sanskrit. So the Parshva clan went westwards and settled in what is now Persia. And the name Persia comes from the Parshva clan, the name of the clan itself. So Persia, from that perspective, is a daughter civilization of India. So the Parshvas they went out of India, they settled in what is now Persia, and eventually they became a civilization in their own right, a pretty robust civilization, a pretty great civilization, right? And that's why you will find that there is obviously very clear linkages. There are clear linkages between India and Persia. But understand this, that the Persian population of today, if you see the Persian people today, they will be nothing like the Persian people, the Persian population that existed around 500 AD. In 500 AD, the Persians had not lost their sovereignty yet. They had not been invaded and overrun by the Arabs and then by the Seljuks, the Turks, and so on. So they were still sovereign, and because of that, foreign populations had not been settled in Persia. So the original true Persians of 500 AD, they don't look like the Persians of today. If you go to Persia today, you will find lots of Persians who look almost like Europeans. These are the descendants of people who were brought in by the Turks from the Caucasus region and settled in Persia. You will find lots of Persians who look more Turkic, smaller eyes, and that sort of those features, right? That's because a tremendous number of Turks were settled in Persia by the Turkic occupiers of Persia. The Turks ruled Persia for roughly 1,000 years, right? Before that, it was the Arabs who ruled Persia for several centuries. So the population has been significantly transformed today. But the original Persians of around 500 BC, they would have looked very much like the people of Western India, Balochistan, Sindh, Gujarat, and so on. They would have looked very much like the people of these parts of the subcontinent. So that is one thing we have to understand. Today's Persians are kind of different. The original Persians, they will still look like people from Western India, but lots of Persians, lots of Iranians today look more like people from the Caucasus region, or maybe like Turks. So that's one thing we have to keep in mind. Now, so that now that we understand that, what about Persia never trying to invade India? See, the Persian Empire, especially the Achaemenid Empire, the Hachemonish Empire, was an extremely militaristic empire, an expansionist empire. They constantly fought against the Greeks, and eventually with the Romans. They conquered Mesopotamia, they conquered Egypt, right? They fought the Greeks continuously, relentlessly. They even fought the Romans, the Persians did. So if they were so powerful, if they were an expansionist empire, why on earth did they never bother to expand eastwards into India? See, Persia and India had a common border, okay? And that border changed from time to time. See, when India became fragmented, when India was unified under a single empire like the Mauryan Empire and so on, then the border would shift westwards because India was more powerful. But when India was fragmented, then the border would shift slightly eastwards when the Persians would take small bites of territory. That is a natural process, and there's going to be some border tensions, low-level tensions. But there was never a Persian invasion of India. Border skirmishes and all those things, they happen between any two neighbors. So there were times when the India-Persia border was at the Sindhu River, the Indus River. There were times when it was further west, significantly further west from the Indus River. There were times when Gandhar was part of the Achaemenid Empire. There were times when Gandhar was with us. Historically, it was ours. But why did Persia never bother to invade India? Why did they never even draw up plans to launch an invasion of India? That is a big question. And that's another big question that no historian has bothered to answer. And to understand the reasons why, let us revisit a period, a small episode of history that happened after Persia was overrun by the Arabs. So after the Persians were overrun by the Persians composed a poem. See, when the Arabs conquered Persia, at that time in India, the Gupta Empire had essentially disintegrated. And there was a period of time for several centuries where India was not unified under a single empire. India was a collection of kingdoms at this time. It's a cyclical process. So, because India was no longer unified and under a single empire, India could not help the Persians. And when the Arabs invaded and conquered Persia, the Persians wrote this poem. Let me put this on the screen. Okay, it's called the Ballad of King Bahram, and it has you'll find multiple versions of this. Let me put this on the screen. So if you want the actual research paper, this is the one. Okay, it's by J.C. Tavadia. It's from 1955, Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and Ireland. And this gentleman writes about this a rhymed ballad in the Pahlavi language. Okay, and what's it say? It says, "When may it be that the courier comes from India and says that the Shah Bahram from the family of the Qais has come, that there are 1,000 elephants, upon their heads are elephant keepers, and that he holds the raised standard in the manner of the Khosravas, that the advance guard is led by army chiefs, an intelligent man should be made our clever interpreter, who may go and speak to the Indians. What have we seen from the hand of the Arabs? They ruined our religion and killed our kings. We are from the Aryan race, and they are like demons, the Arabs. They have taken away the sovereignty from the Khosravas, not by skill, not by manliness, but by mockery and scorn. They have taken away by force from men wives and wealth, palaces, parks, gardens, and so much more." Okay. Now let me show you a different translation. It says, "When will a courier come from India to say that King Bahram of the family of the Kavi has come upon elephants and to rescue Persia? And a man should be dispatched, a clever interpreter, who may go and tell to India what has happened to us at the hands of the Arabs. They've destroyed our religion and killed our kings," and so on. So the Persians wish, clearly, from this poem, it's clear that they wished that India would come and rescue them. And they wish that they could send an interpreter or a messenger to the Indians who could tell the Indians what has happened in Persia, what horrors have befallen Persia, and maybe the Indians could come and help us. And King Bahram from the family of the Kavis will come from India. What does that tell you? That a Persian king from the family of the Kavis will come from India. What does it tell you? It means the Persians regarded Indians as their kin, as their family, as the same race and blood. Do you understand what that means? It means Persia and India were always kin. We were sister civilizations, you could say, or daughter, mother, whatever you want to call it. But the Persians did not regard Indians as foreigners. And when you come upon the worst times in your life, who do you ask for help? Do you ask strangers for help? No, you ask your closest relatives for help. So that is the tragedy of what happened in Persia, and they wish the Indians could come and help them. But India at that time was fragmented. We did not have a single empire. In case we did, perhaps our emperor could have come and could have gone and helped the Persians. But at that time, India was fragmented. The Gupta Empire had ended because of the Hunnic invasions, relentless Hunnic invasions. And that's what happened. So, why did the Persians never try to invade India? Because we were family. They saw us as their kin. They saw us as their own people. And I suppose we would have seen the Persians as our own people too. And there seems to have been some kind of understanding between India and Persia. We won't fight each other. We may have some border disputes. We may have some disagreements, small scale disagreements about the line of the border, where it should be and all. That's a different story. But I will not invade you. You will not invade me. We may have disagreements, but we will resolve them in a civilized manner. That was the deal, right? So the Persians did not attempt to invade India because they were scared of India, because the Indian war elephants were very scary or whatever. It was some kind of cultural, civilizational, blood level understanding that we won't fight each other. And that's something we can't imagine today. If you look at Persia today, many Persians look very foreign to Indians, right? The language also is incomprehensible almost. The language is actually very comprehensible. You spend a couple of weeks in Persia, you'll start speaking Persian. If you are someone who speaks so as a so-called Indo-Aryan language, it will be very easy to pick up Persian. I, when I was a student, I knew Persians who were, people from students from Iran who were studying in India, and they spoke Hindi fluently. They just picked it up. The two languages are very, very similar. The roots are very similar. So that's the deal about Persia. Subhojit says, hypothetically, wouldn't it have been better if the ancient Indians pushed beyond Gandhar into Persia and controlled the Zagros mountains? Given that Persia was our sister civilization, daughter civilization, whatever you want to call it, and culturally not very different from us, and stopping invasions of the Zagros mountains would have been easier instead of the Khyber Pass. The Arabs were able to reach India so rapidly because the Persians failed to defend the Zagros mountains. Okay, so what's the deal? What should India have done? First of all, let's ask ourselves, where are the so-called these Zagros mountains? So let's take a look at the map and let's determine where these mountains lie. So let's just ask the map. Zagros mountain range. There we go. So it's going to be in western Iran. There we have it. As you can see, it's highlighted over here. It's in western Persia, western Iran, the Zagros mountains. And when the Arabs invaded Persia, they came through this region. They did not come by sea. They came by land, and they had to cross the Zagros mountains. And they were able to do that successfully, and they conquered Iran and Persia and transformed it forever. Right? Persia has never come back from what happened. It lost its sovereignty, and the sovereignty never really returned culturally and civilizationally. The culture and civilization were erased. That's what happened. So, would it not have been better for India to have pushed beyond Gandhar and taken over Persia and controlled the Zagros mountains? Right? Did it make sense for us to do that? So, two things. First of all, like I discussed in the previous question, India and Persia had an understanding. We won't fight each other. I won't invade you, you won't invade me, and that's it. We are the same people. We don't fight each other. We'll fight the Mlecchas, the barbarians, the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians and all. That's what the Persians did. And our people were happy in the subcontinent. Gigantic landmass. We don't need to go beyond that. So why fight our own people? That sort of thing. So India and Persia never fought each other in any significant way, beyond minor border disagreements or whatever, which never led to a war, a full-scale war. Maybe some small clashes here and there. That is natural even among Indian kingdoms. It is to happen, but never a full-scale invasion. So that's why India never invaded Persia. Secondly, how would the rulers of India know that something has emerged out of Arabia that would very rapidly take over Persia and then attempt to invade India? See, when the Mongols suddenly erupted from Mongolia under Sri Genghis Khan, the Chinese initially did not take them seriously. Why? Because nothing had ever come out of Mongolia that had any serious consequences. Mongolia was forever a land of small tribes that constantly fought each other. So the Chinese never imagined that the Mongols would suddenly unite under one person and they would become the greatest conquering force of all time until that time. Similarly, the Arabs were pretty similar. They came from a land where almost nothing was there, nothing grew, a desert land, and they themselves were these small tribes. They were a polytheistic culture, and those days you did not have social media and TV and journalists and whatever, so you did not know what was happening in Arabia. And let's say you find out that this new religion that's come from Arabia, you won't take it seriously, right? And the Arabs had never conquered anybody until this point in time. So the Indians would never have imagined, our ancestors would never have imagined that something monumental would emerge out of Arabia and very rapidly conquer Persia and then start knocking at our doorstep and trying to conquer us. So multiple reasons why India did not do this. Firstly, we had this understanding we will never fight each other, India and Persia. Secondly, nobody had any idea of something monumental that's going to erupt out of Arabia and conquer Persia and then eventually seek to conquer India. These are the reasons why none of these things happened. Feline Lover says, why are all Indo-Iranian people of Central Asia classified as Iranic, specifically Eastern Iranic, when they either seem to be equally close to Indians and Iranians or closer to Indians? Even modern Eastern Iranic, like Pashtuns, are genetically closest to Northwestern Indians. Do you think Eastern Iranic is a misnomer? See, there has been this concerted effort in the West. See, today, who has written our history? It's the Westerners who have written our history. They've written the histories of the world, of the countries of the world. When it comes to the history of Persia, they will draw upon Persian sources, but they will come to their own conclusions. So the history of the world, the way we read it, the way we are taught it, is written by Westerners. Now, for the West, India was a civilization to be destroyed. That attempt is still going on to destroy India's civilization, culture, etc. It's still ongoing. So when they see us as a civilization to be destroyed, because they want to make the entire world a monotheistic place, right? In that case, you have to erase Indian history. You have to erase any signs of Indian greatness. And you have to justify your destruction of India, right? Because the British ruled India for 2.5 centuries. They had to justify the destruction of India. So what do you do to justify that? You portray the Indians as barbaric, savages, backward, primitive people who have all these horrible problems in society, and they deserve to be ruled by white people. That's what you have to portray India as. So you have to erase any aspect of Indian history that shows that India was great. Now, it's known that Indians in ancient times did venture out into Central Asia and various parts of the world and settle these places. For example, before the Turkification, Islamization of Central Asia was Hindu-Buddhist, all of it. You still have stupas in Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan and whatnot, all across Central Asia, even in so-called Xinjiang. Even in Armenia, you will find Hindu temples that were repurposed into churches have now been repurposed in Artasak, etc., into mosques. You will find statues of Bhagwan Vishnu. You'll find them in Russia. So Indians were spread all across Central Asia, and Indians established kingdoms and dynasties in Central Asia. And these eventually intermingled with local peoples, and maybe the genetic makeup became mixed, but these were still culturally Indian. So to deny India's greatness, to justify your destruction of India and your plunder of India, you have to deny these things. So what do? You classify all these various Central Asian peoples as Iranic, not Indian. The Scythians, the Shakas, Iranic. The Pashtuns, Iranic. Everything Iranic. Nothing Indian. You deny any presence of India anywhere. India was a backward, poor, society. Nothing great ever came out of India. That's how you justify your rule over India. And that attitude has continued even after the British Raj ended, because the British Raj has never ended. The British Empire has simply transformed into a different entity, which is the American Empire. And the same thought process continues, and they still seek to subjugate India. They still seek to destroy Indian civilization. Those efforts are ongoing right now on India's soil, right? So that is the reason why you have what you have described here. That Central Asian peoples are all described as Iranic. The Scythians are described as Iranic. The Pashtuns are described as Iranic. The Pashtuns are an extension of the northern Indian population, but genetically and culturally very clearly so. But they'll be described as Iranic. Next, Amisha says, why does Turkey deny the Armenian genocide so vehemently when the genocide was done by the Ottomans, not by the current Turkish state? First of all, This is a horrible topic, okay? The Armenian genocide was not one event, it was multiple events. There were at least three different waves of the Armenian genocide, starting in the last quarter of the 19th century, and it culminated around 1915 when the triumvirate of Anwar, Talat, and Jamal, the three pashas, the young Turks, they decided to exterminate the Armenians from what is Turkey, currently now Turkey, Anatolia, and so on. And so this was a horrific event and a horrific series of events. So the first phases in the late 19th century of the Armenian genocide happened under Ottoman rule. But the culmination of the Armenian genocide happened during the rule of the three pashas, the young Turks, Anwar, Talat, and Jamal. So that was not the Ottoman Empire. And beyond that, it's not just the Armenian genocide. There's been a Pontic genocide. The indigenous Greeks who resided in what is currently Turkey, they were genocided, right? It's a long story. We cannot go into all the details today. The question is, these events did happen. The genocides did happen, right? So why does Turkey deny that this happened? Because it was done by the Ottomans and then by the young Turks, by the triumvirate of Anwar, Talat, Jamal. What does it have to do with today's Turkey, right? That's the question you're asking. Well, you see, today's Turkey is a continuation of all those eras. And so after the triumvirate period of Talat, Anwar, Jamal, you had a brief period of foreign occupation. Then you had the Turkish War of Independence, which was won by Shri Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. And that's when the modern nation of Turkey was founded. Ataturk saved Turkey. He freed it from foreign occupation. And he ruled as a dictator for until 1938 or something. You can look it up, the exact years. And after Ataturk's death, you had the continuation of Turkey and you had multiple dictatorships. All of those governments, you had periods of military rule and so on, and they all claim to be continuing what Ataturk started. Now today you have Erdogan, right? Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who seeks to undo whatever Ataturk did and go back to the time of the Ottoman Empire. He seeks to re-Islamize Turkey because Ataturk tried his best to essentially erase Islam from Turkey. He transformed Turkey into a secular nation by force. He changed the holiday from Friday to Sunday. He said that no women will wear a veil and so on. He did so many of these reforms. And today Turkey is going back to its Ottoman heritage. They're kind of the younger Turkish people are beginning to turn their back on the reforms of Ataturk. The older Turkish people, they are still secular. So Turkey is reverting to its Ottoman roots, and Erdogan seeks to create a neo-Ottoman empire of sorts. So when Turkey is clearly identifying with its Ottoman heritage, and the Ottomans did this barbaric thing, and the later government also, well, Turkey will deny that, right? And the thing is, there'll be lots of Turks who privately extol and glorify the genocide. There was another event, the burning of Smyrna. There's a city called Smyrna in Anatolia, which is now called Izmir. So that city was burned. The Greek, Armenian, Christian, etc., Jewish quarters were burned by the Turks. And lots of people obviously died. And the Turks like to make fun of the Greeks, saying that, you guys swim very well. That's why you survived. You great swimmers, you Greeks. So privately, the Turks, they celebrate the genocides. They glorify the genociders. And that's why publicly, so they identify with what happened. They are proud of what happened privately. And publicly, that's why they will say that this never happened. The genocide never happened. So that's the deal. The genocides did happen. The Pontic genocide, the Armenian genocide, and God knows what else the Turks did. absolute brutal barbarity. Right. Okay, a couple of questions. Saloni Mishra says, why was Zoroastrianism almost wiped out by Islam, but Hinduism wasn't? Abhijit Shira Rajanish says, from what I gather, Dharma seems to have declined rapidly in Gandhar and Kashmir soon after the arrival of foreign rulers, but didn't decline quite as severely in the other parts of northern and western India. What was different in Gandhar and Kashmir? Let me address the second one first. Dharma did not decline in Kashmir. It declined in Gandhar rapidly. Kashmir, it took a long, long time for Dharma to decline. Okay? Now, coming to Saloni's question, why was Zoroastrianism wiped out rapidly, very rapidly by Islam, but Hinduism did not? You see, what is the thing that we call Hinduism? It's the oldest known religious, cultural, civilizational practice in the world that still exists, right? It's thousands of years old, and it has absorbed all kinds of local folk traditions. Everything has been absorbed into it, and it's part of Hinduism. So if you look at the way our ancestors practiced what we call Hinduism in different parts of India, the practices were very different. They would worship local gods, local goddesses, folk deities, nature deities, rivers, mountains, hills, trees, ancestors, Pitrus. All kinds of local traditions were combined into Hinduism. Of tremendously diverse, tremendously plural religion, if you want to call it a religion, right? And those traditions came back from thousands of years before, maybe tens of thousands of years. So these were very ancient practices. And Hinduism doesn't have this pyramidal military style command and control structure where if you do a decapitation strike at the very top, everything crumbles. It's not like that. Hinduism is completely decentralized. There is no pope in Hinduism. There is no cardinal. There are no priests. Priests, pandits and all we have, but we don't have bishops and cardinals and popes and all that. So if you take out that leadership portion, everything else just crumbles and collapses. It's not the case. And people held on to their heritage, their culture, their ancestral customs, because those went back thousands of years. So these are some of the reasons why Hinduism could not be wiped out by the Turks, even though they tried their best. It was not for a lack of trying that they were not able to convert the Indian subcontinent. But as we know, what is now Pakistan, Bangladesh, that's almost exclusively Islamic now. Afghanistan, which was historically Gandhar, is almost exclusively like 99.99% Islamic today. So these things happen, right? So there was success, but today, even if you look at the overall population of the subcontinent, it's still majority Hindu, at least nominally. I'm not sure how many Indians today in India actually practice Hinduism. Some of them are Hindus only in name. Some of them have converted to some foreign religion quietly, secretly. And yeah, Hinduism is the way things are going, it will be extinct soon. 50 years, 100 years maximum, if we don't change course. But that's a different story. We'll not go into that right now. So that's why Hinduism, because of its incredible antiquity, because people were practicing these traditions for thousands of years, they didn't want to give them up, because we do not have this top-down structure. If you take out the top leadership, everything else collapses. And because of the incredible decentralization and plurality of Hinduism, that's why Hinduism could not be wiped out. Also because of the Varna Jati system, which acted as a preserver. The Varna Jati system acted as a preserver and savior of Hinduism. Okay? You may call it evil or whatever caste system you may call it. It's not a caste system. It's a Varna Jati system. It's a totally different thing. It's an organization of a self-organizing society, which every society has. So that's why Hinduism could not be wiped out. What about Zoroastrianism? Well, you see, Zoroastrianism, it emerged, we don't quite know when it emerged. Maybe around 700 BC or somewhere around that time. Probably after Kurush, Cyrus the Great. His name was actual name was Kurush Vajrak. So, most likely, it is after the reign of Kurush that Zoroastrianism emerged. That's the consensus today. I'm not quite sure if it's true, but let's assume that's around that time that Zoroastrianism emerges. Zarathustra is born and he brings about this new religion, maybe around 600, 700 AD, BC, around that time. So, what was this new religion, Zoroastrianism? It was a polytheistic revolt against Hinduism. See, before Zarathustra, Persia had only one religion and culture, which was Hinduism. Okay? The old Vedic religion. Let's ask Google if Google agrees. Let's ask Google if many people will disagree and Google may disagree, but let's see. Okay, what was the pre Zoroastrian religion of Persia? Let's see what it says. Okay, this is going to be fun. The pre-Zoroastrian religion of Persia was the ancient Indo-Iranian religion, a polytheistic and shamanistic faith that shared many similarities with the Vedic religion. Okay, so it is indirectly telling you that it was Hinduism. Pre-Iranian the old Indo-Iranian religion, shamanistic and polytheistic. What on earth is that? The old Indo-Iranian religion was Hinduism, Vedic Hinduism. So Persia was Hindu. Then Zarathustra comes into the picture and he says that we need to revolt against Hinduism. We need to reform Hinduism. He was another great reformer. We have so many reformers in society in India today, right? We have so many so-called reformers of Hindu society today who want to reform the backward religion called Hinduism. So Zarathustra was one of those. He was born a Hindu. He said, I will reform Hinduism and I will create this new religion or an inversion of Hinduism, which eventually came to be known as Zoroastrianism in the English language. So this was a polytheistic religion. And now some people will say it was a monotheistic religion. Many Parsis will say it was monotheistic. If Zoroastrianism was monotheistic, why was Mitra a deity in Zoroastrianism? Let me show you. Okay. First of all, the Romans worship Mitra. Okay, so Mithraism. What was Mithraism? An ancient Roman mystery religion. Let's see what Wikipedia has to say about this, even though it's not necessarily a reliable source of information. So it was a Roman mystery religion. It was inspired by Iranian worship of the Zoroastrian divinity Mitra, the Zoroastrian god, in Iranian god. Okay, so as you can see that this is, and they will say it's a Yazata, which is a divinity, which means a god. And who was Mitra? It comes from the Sanskrit word Mitram, and the common noun Mitra, Vedic common noun Mitra. So what is Mitra? Mitra is a Vedic god, Mitra Varun. So the point is, Zoroastrianism was a polytheistic religion, but it was an inversion of Hinduism. The Devas became the bad guys, the Asuras became the good guys, that sort of thing. And you see, Zoroastrianism was not deeply rooted in society. It was imposed somehow upon society. We don't quite know how. And 1,000 years is not a long time for a religion to take root, which has been imposed externally on society. It did not emerge organically like what we call Hinduism did over thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands of years. Zoroastrianism was an artificial religion. So it was imposed somehow on Persian society. But when Islam came, I suppose Zoroastrianism may have had this sort of structure where if you take out the priests, the dasturs or whatever, then the whole society, the whole system collapses. And that's why Zoroastrianism was easy to wipe out from Persia. Of course, some Zoroastrians refused to convert and they had no option but to flee. They fled to India, obviously, because, well, who else will welcome them but their own people, the Indians? So that's why Zoroastrianism was wiped out rapidly. Hinduism could not be wiped out. What about Gandhar and Kashmir? See, Gandhar, present Afghanistan, 1,000 years ago, was almost entirely Buddhist, not Hindu. If you want to differentiate between Hinduism and Buddhism, like today people do. So then it was Buddhist, it was not Hindu. There was Hinduism, but it was not the majority thing. It was Buddhism. You will see that Central Asia also was mostly Buddhist at that time. And whenever you had Buddhism, there was a very rapid conversion to Islam. You've heard of Muhammad Ghori, right? Muhammad Ghori's ancestors were Buddhists who converted to Islam. So wherever you had Buddhism, for whatever reason, there was very rapid conversion to Islam without much resistance. No fight back. Just convert. Why is it so? Well, ask yourselves about the nature of Buddhism. I will not go into that in detail. I will not. But try and find out what is different between Buddhism and Hinduism. Why did all the Buddhist regions of Central Asia, Gandhar, etc., convert so rapidly to Islam, but Hinduism did not? So Kashmir was Hindu, it was Shaivite, and Kashmir did not convert to Islam for several centuries after Gandhar. It's only in the last 300 or so years that those mass conversions by force, not voluntarily. So these are the differences between these different cultures and why the things happened the way they did. All right. Amisha says, what did Islamic scholars think of the pyramids in Egypt? Were they considered some sort of pagan monument? Were there any attempts to Islamicize them in some way? The pyramids. So Egypt loses its sovereignty first to the Persians about 2300 or so years ago, 2400 or so years ago, give or take a century. Okay, then Alexander walks in and liberates Egypt from the Persians, but he installs a governor who reports to him. So that's the beginning of the Greek period of Egyptian history. So Egypt still hasn't recovered its sovereignty. It's now under Greek rule, and Alexander dies, and then Egypt becomes ruled by the Ptolemaic dynasty. Ptolemaic dynasty. After the Ptolemaic dynasty, the last ruler was Cleopatra, the great, famous. After that, you have the Roman rule over Egypt. And after that, you have the imposition of Christianity and all that. And eventually, the Arabs take over. So, what did the Arabs... So, once the Arabs take over, the society is very rapidly converted to Islam. Okay? Because of a variety of reasons. Now, so the society becomes Islamic. And then once a society becomes Islamic, you will see that there is a tendency to destroy your own ancestor, your own heritage, like the Taliban did with the Bamiyan Buddhas as an example. The old Taliban, not the current Taliban, who are our friends. If you want to look at it that way, maybe you don't. Whatever. So Egypt becomes an Islamic society, and how did they regard the pyramids? They regarded the pyramids as manifestations of polytheism and idolatry and paganism, or whatever you want to call it. Bad stuff. So did they ever try to Islamicize these pyramids in some way? No, but some of them tried to destroy the pyramids. So for example, you had the great Islamic ruler, Kurdish ruler, Saladin Ayyubi, who fought the Crusaders and who took Jerusalem from the Crusaders and then retained Jerusalem. And he fought against Richard the Lionheart. Long story. So Salahuddin was once the governor of Egypt. And his second son, Al-Aziz Uthman, later became the Sultan of Egypt. So Saladin's son, Al-Aziz Uthman, he said that the pyramids are evil. They are manifestations of polytheism and idolatry, and they have to be destroyed. So he actually tried to destroy several pyramids. He tried his best. He had, I don't know how many, hundreds, maybe thousands of workers attempting to dismantle pyramids. The pyramid of Menkaure, it still bears testimony to what happened. Let's Google that, shall we? The pyramid of Menkaure. Pyramid of Menkaure. What's it look like? Can you see this huge, gigantic slash in the pyramid? Let's go to the Wikipedia page, shall we? 1 second. I'm sure the Wikipedia page has a better image of that vandalism. So, yeah, as you can see, there's a big gash in the pyramid. So that is what the Arabs, what this Sultan Al-Aziz Uthman, this is what he was able to do over a period of nearly 1 year. He had, I don't know how many workers working on this, and they wanted to dismantle the entire pyramid, and they were able to make very slow progress. I mean, 1 or 2 stones per day they were able to bring down. Once a stone will fall into the sand, it will sink into the sand. It's almost impossible to remove. So after a tremendous amount of effort, they were able to make this gash in this smallish pyramid, and then they gave up. So they tried, but maybe the pyramids were built by aliens or whatever, but humans could not at least the Islamic rulers were not able to destroy the pyramids. Eventually they gave up. They said that, you know what, this is beyond us, we'll just ignore these things. But today Egypt is in this very, very paradoxical situation. They don't like the pyramids. They consider the pyramids even today to be a manifestation of polytheism and whatever else, all bad stuff according to them. They hate the pyramids, but the entire economy of Egypt is based on the pyramids, and they have to welcome foreigners who want to see the pyramids. That's the situation Egypt finds itself in. Paradoxical, isn't it? Okay, multiple questions here. Saloni Mishra says, how come Arab Muslims were able to Arabicize the Egyptians but not the Persians? Math, etc. says, how did generation after generation of Turks get Iranicized, Persianized? Because Ayatollah Khamenei was the first Persian to rule Iran in almost a millennium. Namisha says, why didn't Iran start speaking Arabic when it was under Muslim Arab rule much longer than the Levant, Northern Africa, or Sicily? Right, interesting questions. First of all, one correction. Ayatollah Khamenei was not the first Persian to rule Iran in almost a millennium. He was the third. Who were the first two? It was Muhammad Reza Pahlavi and his father. So Muhammad Reza Pahlavi's father was what? I forget his name. You can look it up. Reza Shah. I think his name was Reza Shah. He started ruling Persia around 1925. And after him, his son Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, he ruled Persia until 1979, which is when the Islamic Revolution happens in Persia, and Mr. Khomeini takes over. So Mr. Khomeini was a third Persian after those two Shahs to rule Persia in almost a millennium. What happened to Persia for a millennium? You see, around the 11th century, you had the Seljuk Empire that took over Persia. Okay, there were Turks who had converted to Islam. They originally were Tengriists or polytheists, obviously, and they conquered Persia, and they established a huge empire. The empire was culturally Persian. So the Seljuks conquered Persia in the 11th century, and from that time onwards, Persia was ruled by Turks, and that's how all the transformations happened in Persian society. Lots of foreigners were settled in Persia. Today, only about half of Persia's population is Persian, and even those Persians are mixed with those foreigners who are settled in Persia. Which is why I say that the Persian population of today is very different from the Persian population of 500 AD, which was like us, genetically, ethnically, culturally, and so on. Now the question is, the Arabs were able to Arabicize the Egyptians, but not the Persians. Why? Why didn't Iran start speaking Arabic? What happened? And how did Turks become Persianized is the question. See, the Arabs were able to Arabize the Egyptians because, well, I would say for multiple reasons. First of all, the Egyptian language is very closely related to the Arabic language. They probably come under the Semitic language family or something similar. Let's quickly fact check what I just said, shall we? Let's remove this. Okay. Egyptian language. Egyptian language. What language family does it belong to? Language family. Language family. Language family. Afro-Asiatic. Afro-Asiatic. And subdivisions are Berber, Chadic, Egyptian, Osmantic, Semitic. Okay. So it's a sister language of the Semitic language family. And in the Semitic language family, you have the Arabic language. Okay. I don't have to prove that. Or do I? Let's quickly take a look at that. Okay. Where do I search? Okay. Arabic language. Arabic. Yeah. Arabic is a central Semitic language. Okay. There we have the proof. Okay. So where's the question? Here's the question. Here we are. So the Egyptian language was quite similar to the Arabic language. That's one reason why Arabic was very rapidly, successfully imposed on the people of Egypt. And secondly, the conversion to Islam also happened very rapidly. So that's why Egypt was very rapidly Arabized. I'm sure there must be other factors and the other reasons, but this is what I can think of. Because the languages were so similar, so the Arabs imposed their language. Why not to Persia? Because see, the Zoroastrian religion was easy to wipe out because it was an artificial religion that had not fully taken root in Persian society. In a deep way, the way Hinduism had taken root in Indian society for thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years. So that's why the Zoroastrian religion was eradicated and replaced with Islam very rapidly. But the Persian language was very ancient, going back maybe thousands of years, all the way back to Vedic Sanskrit. They would not give that up, right? Because it was so deep rooted. And one of the reasons the Persian language survived is because of the Shahnameh written by Ferdowsi, which became the standard for the Persian language, which is what the Persian language spoken today is very similar to the Persian language spoken during written in the Shahnameh. The Shahnameh, if you look at the oldest founding myths of the people of Persia, it essentially echoes the Rig Vedic stories. We'll not go into that in this question. So that's why the religion was replaced by Islam, but the language could not be eradicated. But what happened is that the Arabic script was imposed in Persia. The Persians had their own cuneiform script. That was discarded, and the Arabic script was imposed in Persia, and the Persians modified the Arabic script somewhat. Okay, and there are certain pronunciations that don't exist in the Arabic language, but they exist in the Persian language, like je. The Arabs can't say je. The Persians have the pronunciation je. So they have modified the Arabic script. The je term has 3 dots instead of whatever exists in Arabic. So they have kind of repurposed the Arabic script somewhat to use it for the Persian language. But some of the Arabic things have crept into the Persian language. For example, instead of saying Parsi, they say Farsi, right? Because the Arabs can't say pa. They can only say fa or ba. So the Persians had the choice of either saying Barsi or Farsi. So they chose Farsi. It should have been Parsi from Persia, Parshwa. So some changes happened, but overall the Persian language survived because it was so ancient the Arabs could not uproot it. The Persians would not give it up. So that explains hopefully why Iran did not start speaking Arabic. Arabic never took over in Iran, became mainstream in Iran. But obviously the Quran, etc., are in Arabic, and the Persian did not use Persian, as far as I know, in a large scale way for the Quran. It was always Arabic. Now, why did Turks become Persianized? What happened? See, Persia was a very ancient civilization, as we know, right? And because they had converted to Islam, so there was no need to destroy their language and culture and whatnot, as far as the non-religious aspects are concerned. So so Persia was you could say, what's the term? It was what is the term? So Persia was this great culture, prestigious culture, prestigious. Persian culture was prestigious. So the Arabs did not want to become Persianized because they said that we are the originators of Islam. We should not adopt any foreign culture. But the Turks were happy to do that. The Turks, wherever they went, they adopted the local cultures. In India, they became the Turk Shahis. They adopted Hinduism and Buddhism in India. And when they conquered Persia, they became Persianized because they wanted to absorb the more prestigious culture. Turks married Iranian women, lots of them, and that's why if you see the paintings of Turkey of Persian rulers from like Nadir Shah or whoever, you will see them having slanted eyes like the Turkic peoples of Central Asia. So the Turks absorbed Persian culture because Persian culture was way more prestigious than any other culture they knew. That's how it went. Tuhin Ray says, the West has organized universities like Oxford, Harvard, Yale from medieval ages. Well, Yale isn't medieval, Yale is more recent, but okay. We Indians were also wealthy and knowledgeable to their levels. To their levels? Okay. Yet, why did we not have such organized institutions for education? Okay. See, this is the problem with the Indian education system. I don't blame my dear friend Tuhin for asking this question. Probably they never taught the truth when he studied, right? It's not his fault. We were not knowledgeable to the levels of the West. We were the originators of all knowledge. The West absorbed and digested our knowledge, and now they present as their knowledge. Have you heard of Takshashila? The University of Takshashila. That's the oldest university we know of in the world. There must be older ones too, but I can think of Takshashila, which was founded maybe around sometime in the first millennium BC. Vishnugupta Chanakya was a student in Takshashila, and later he was a professor in Takshashila. Have you heard of Vikramashila? Have you heard of Odantapuri? Have you heard of Nalanda? Have you heard of Sharda Peeth? Have you heard of Vallabhi in Western India? There are so many universities that I can name, and there must be way more whose names have been erased. We invented the concept of the university. When the University of Nalanda was destroyed by the Turks about 1,000 years ago, roughly, it is said that the library burned for several months. That's how much. That was the volume of books, texts, whatever you want to call it, in the library. We were the inventors of the concept of the university. So I'm not sure why some Indians are not aware of this. I don't blame the Indians who are unaware of this. I blame their teachers. I blame the rotten education system of India. Right? Udit Mahesh says, how did England become the origin of the English-speaking people, which it is today? Did the Anglo-Saxons wipe out the Celts from England before achieving complete settlement over that region like the US did in North America? Or did the Anglo-Saxons raid the Celtic people and settle and intermingle with the local population, and the region became England as it's known today? The name England comes from the Angles. Now let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the very beginning, like I always like to do. You've heard of something called Stonehenge, right? Stonehenge. Let's Google that. Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a prehistoric landmark. It's how old is it? Let me see quickly. How old is Stonehenge? It was built about 2600 BC, or maybe 3000 BC or something, roughly. So it's about 5000 years old. Stonehenge. This is in England. So the original English people built this monument, Stonehenge. I'll not go into the details of what this is. So the original people of the islands started building it about 5000 years ago. Those people, their male lineages have disappeared because there was an invasion of the British islands by a group of fantastic people who are now today called the Yamnaya. Okay. They had the haplogroup R1b. They were absolute, what can I say, barbarians, let's say. And they invaded and conquered the islands and killed off all the males, and then proceeded to have offspring with the females who were subjugated. That was the origin of the Celtic people. Typically, Celtic people have red hair. Okay, and the Celtic people, they lived in the British Islands, Scotland, Ireland, Britain, etc. They also lived in Spain and in Western France and all over France, Gaul, also present in Switzerland. So that's the original homeland of the Celtic peoples. Then what happens is that the Romans conquer the region and they take over large parts of what is today the UK. They did not conquer the northern parts. They built a wall there to keep the barbarians away. The barbarians had red hair and blonde hair. And for a few centuries, Rome ruled what is today the UK. Some parts of it, not all of it, not Ireland, not Scotland, but the rest of it. And the Romans eventually had to leave because their empire crumbled. And then you have an invasion of the British Islands from Germany. A bunch of Germans invade what is today the UK. It's the Angles, which is one ethnic group, and the Saxons, who came from present-day Saxony. The Angles and the Saxons, both Germanic tribes, come and they attempt to invade the islands over multiple decades. Eventually, they take over the islands. They subjugate the local Celtic people, the red-headed people, and they establish the Anglo-Saxon rule over the British Islands. Not all of them, but what is present-day England, more or less. Okay. So you have the Anglo-Saxons who are ruling now. So now we have how many ethnic groups in England, in the UK? You have the Celts, who are the descendants of the original women and the Yamna invaded males. And then you also have the Anglo-Saxons. So two ethnic groups. Then, in the year 1066 AD, there was a new invasion, the last successful invasion of England, which was carried out by Normans, who were of Nordic ancestry mixed with the French. The Normans. And they invade England. Their ruler was William, Duke of Normandy, who came to be known as William the Conqueror. And now you have a period of time where the Normans, who are French-speaking Nordic people, who rule England. And it is the combination of these three ethnic groups, the Celts, the Anglo-Saxons, and the Normans. It is the combination of these three ethnic groups, their cultures and their languages, that gave rise to what is today English. So English is a Germanic language. It's not a Celtic language. What are the Celtic languages? Well, Irish, Gaelic, Scottish. These are Scottish, most likely, yeah. These are Celtic languages. English is a Germanic language. It's an invasive language, actually. And that's how it happened in very brief. That's how it went. So there are three ethnic groups that intermingled. And today, which is the dominant culture and language? English. Tuhin Rai says, Tuhin Rai says, the South American civilizations like the Aztecs or the Incas outnumbered the Spanish very heavily. How did these flourishing civilizations fall to the Spanish conquest like a stack of cards, like a pack of cards? What happened is the question. So in Central America, present-day Mexico, you had the Aztec Empire, the Triple Alliance, which was the dominant force, geopolitical force in the region, in present-day Mexico, that region. And on the west coast of South America, you had the Inca Empire. Totally different empires. Let's take a look at the map so that we understand what I am talking about. 1 second. Okay. All right, let's go to the map of the world and we'll check out what regions I am referring to. So we go to the Americas. When we talk about the Inca Empire, it was located in this region around Mexico City. Mexico City was called Tenochtitlan. All right, Mexico City was called Tenochtitlan, and that was the capital of the Triple Alliance, the Aztec Empire. And then you had the Inca Empire, which was based in Peru, right? Where is the Great Lake? Is this the Great Lake? This is the Lake Titicaca, which is, well, the Inca Empire kind of emerged on the banks of this lake. And it became a very massive empire. And it was the largest empire of its time in the world, the Inca Empire. It was established by the great king Pachacuti. So now what happened? So you have these great civilizations and empires, not merely empire, but also civilization, right? Ancient cultures. And they were very populous, the Aztecs as well as the Incas. So what happened? How did a bunch of ragtag Spaniards, barbarians take over? So the Aztec Empire fell to Hernan Cortes in the year 1520, 21 or something. And the Inca Empire fell to another barbarian called Francesco Pizarro in the 1530s. 1530s all the way to 1570s. It's a long process, but you can say 1530s. That's when the Inca Empire fell. So the whole process begins with this misguided person called Christopher Columbus, who was looking for India, who stumbled into the Americas, and he claimed that he has discovered India. Then the Spanish very rapidly understood that it is not India that he has discovered, it is a new land, and they proceeded to brutally colonize it. The French also tried, and that's a long story. Okay, the French attempted to do that. They were massacred by the Spaniards. Whatever the place is called. But you had multiple expeditions by the Spanish to more and more colonize the Americas. And the Spanish brought with them not just brutality, not just their foreign religion, Christianity, but they brought with them the diseases of Eurasia. The worst of these was smallpox. So when Hernan Cortes was in the process of invading the Aztec Empire, he came with a small number of men. How did he conquer an empire that had hundreds of thousands of soldiers? One factor was smallpox. There was a horrific smallpox epidemic that was raging across the Aztec Empire. The people of the New World, so-called New World of the Americas, they had zero immunity to the Eurasian diseases. So they were just dying off. Dying left, right, center. Right? Tremendous death toll. Tremendous mortality rate. So you have them trying to survive the smallpox. Many of them are dying. And then the Aztec Empire was a hegemonic empire, and you had many other states that they had absorbed through force, through hegemony. And those people, they obviously wanted to be free of the Aztecs. So they said, oh, a bunch of foreigners have come. Let's align with them temporarily. The foreigners will go back, right? Well, it turns out the foreigners never went back. So the guys of Pizarro, they had about 20,000-30,000 allies with them who were willing to fight on their side. And that's why there was a massive battle. And smallpox turned out to be the game changer, the deciding factor. And that's how the Aztec Empire was dismantled by Hernan Cortes, not with 200 men, but with tens of thousands of native indigenous allies, who then also were eventually brutally, barbarously killed and or converted by the Spaniards. That's one reason. Okay, that's about the Aztec Empire. What about the Inca Empire? So you see, after the conquest of the Aztec Empire, you had these expeditions that were going out into the Americas. You had the Narvaez expedition, whose great survivor was Cabeza de Vaca. That tried to go into what is today Florida to explore the land, and they brought with them smallpox and other diseases. Then you had the Coronado expedition, which happened later, actually in the 1540s or something. And then you had the Hernando de Soto expedition, who brought with him pigs. So all these expeditions and all these Spaniards, they brought in smallpox, and this smallpox eventually reached all the way down into South America. And when Francesco Pizarro was in the process of trying to invade and conquer the Inca Empire, it was beset by smallpox. The last great Inca emperor was Atahualpa. Okay, and his father died of smallpox. And then Atahualpa had a conflict with his brother, who initially became the emperor, and then Atahualpa became the emperor, but he was treacherously captured and eventually killed by Pizarro, and that's how the Inca Empire also went down. So you have smallpox playing a big role. You have indigenous traitors, you could say, who allied with the Spaniards, who also played a big role. The same thing happened in the Inca Empire as well. And these are the reasons why the Spaniards were able to conquer uh, the Aztecs and the Incas, in brief. If you want to understand in more detail, check out my podcasts on the Understanding America series, which is currently on hiatus. Right. Amisha says, how accurate is the idea that Spanish colonization in the Americas was significantly more brutal than the other colonial powers, which is the French and the English? So the Spanish were pretty brutal, very brutal. They wiped out the entire population of Hispaniola, which is the island which is today Cuba and Dominica. Where is Hispaniola? Not Dominica, not Cuba and Dominica, but Haiti and the Dominican Republic. This island here was called Hispaniola. It was the home of the Arawak people, and Christopher Columbus was the governor for a while of this island, and he exterminated those people, wiped them out of existence, genocided them. So that's one. So there is Spanish brutality, right? And the Spanish also brutalized the Mexicans, which is the Aztec Triple Alliance, the Incas. They conducted all kinds of barbaric genocides, massacres. When you had the Coronado expedition, which started in Mexico, which was then called New Spain, it went further north into Arizona, etc. What they did is that they had this directive from their king, from their government. Then you see, your job is to find a treasure and wealth for the king, but it's also to convert the local people to Christianity. And you are allowed to fight the local people, but you have to first give them a chance to convert. So they had this legal document which they had to read out, saying that, this land is now taken over by the king of Spain, and this document shows you that it is legal, and you are exhorted to convert to Christianity. If you do that, then we will not murder you and rape you and enslave you, but we will treat you as second-class citizens, and we will allow you to live as long as you become Christian. And if you don't, then we are at liberty to kill you all. And the Spaniards, you know what they would do? They would stand outside a native city at in the middle of the night, 5 kilometers away, and they will read it out to nobody in particular, but in the direction of the city. And then they'll say, yeah, you see, they did not convert. They did not listen to us. They didn't convert. So let's go and kill them all. So they were pretty brutal in that manner. So the Spaniards were very brutal. But once the natives converted to Christianity, they were allowed to live. They were not massacred. There was obviously, and they were not enslaved also if they converted to Christianity. They merely became servants and second-class citizens. Those who survived the smallpox. That's the deal with the Spanish colonization. Pretty brutal. They destroyed the native culture, language, religion, as far as possible. In certain parts of South America, you still have local languages that survive. Some local culture survives. Sometimes some local religions also survive, but mostly it's all the official languages. I mean, the official language in all the countries in South America is Spanish, apart from Brazil, which is Portuguese. Different story. When it comes to the other colonial powers, the French and the British, the French, they tried to be nice to the natives. They actually tried to be friends with the natives as long as it was possible initially. I'm talking about the 1500s. Later, when the French established colonies in North America, way more north of Florida, in what is now Canada, etc., Quebec, and so on, they were pretty brutal against the natives. Okay? But the French did not win the war, right? The war to colonize North America. It is the English who won that. Now, were the English less brutal than the Spanish? The English were far more brutal. They wiped out the Native Americans. They killed millions of bisons. They almost completely exterminated the bison from North America because the Native Americans depended on the bison for their for living. And today, how many Native Americans exist in North America? And what is their status in society today? I would say overall, if you look at the colonization of the Americas, about 100 million Native Americans were exterminated. Most of that happened at the hands of the Anglos, not so much the Spanish. So overall, the Anglos were the most brutal, very systematic, very bureaucratic about that. They passed laws. They passed laws that said that various large parts of North America would be cleared of natives. The natives would be moved to other parts of North America. You had the Trail of Tears. You had the so-called Indian Wars that went on for like a couple of centuries, in which they were essentially genocided out of existence, almost out of existence. And today, the Native Americans are allowed to live on small parcels of land called reservations, where they technically have a sovereignty of some kind, apparently, to some extent. Not real sovereignty, but local police level sovereignty they have. And it's typically barren land, and there's not much you can do to generate any income or whatever. So overall, the Spanish were indeed brutal, they were indeed barbaric, but not as much as the Anglos. Okay. Math and CFLM, okay, whatever, says, were the Turk Shahis Sanskritized Turks, or did they follow Tengrism? The original religion of the Turkic people and the Hunnic people is Tengrism. It's called Tengrism in English. And there is this myth or misconception, which is very prevalent today, that Tengrism is a monotheistic religion. They worship one god called Tengri, which is utter nonsense. Tengrism is a polytheistic religion. They worship the sky father Tengri and the earth mother Umay. They also worship their ancestors. They worship forest spirits. They worship so many other divinities. It's a polytheistic religion. But today there is this effort to portray Tengrism as a monotheistic religion, which is a lie, a malicious lie. So Tengrism is a polytheistic religion. Now, the Turks and the Huns, wherever they traveled, they absorbed the local religion and culture, wherever they went. So the Turk Shahis were most likely descendants of the Shweta Hunas, and maybe some other Turkic elements were there, and they ruled various parts of Gandhara, essentially that region, for a while. How long did they rule? Maybe a couple of centuries or so. And they fought the Arabs. They defended India from the Arabs. Okay. So Turk Shahis, how long did the Turk Shahis? How long did they rule? How long did they rule? Bruh. Did they rule? Okay, a couple of centuries, roughly a couple of centuries, right? Zabulistan, Kabul, Gandhar, etc. So, what was their religion? Were they Sanskritized? What is the meaning of Sanskritization? I'm not quite sure. They practiced Hinduism and Buddhism. It is alleged that they practiced more Buddhism than Hinduism, whatever, but they practiced both religions. They patronized both religions. And as long as they ruled, they defended India from the Arabs. And eventually they were defeated by the Arabs. One of their kings was forced to convert to Islam, and one of this king's ministers, who was a Brahmin, he fought the Arabs. He decided to fight the Arabs, and he set up the Hindu Shahi dynasty. So after the Turk Shahis, you have the rule of the Hindu Shahis, and then things happen, as we know. So there was a deal. They were not Sanskritized, they were Indianized. I don't know what Sanskritized means. Did they speak Sanskrit? They probably spoke the Gandhari language, or maybe a Turkic language. I'm not quite sure. But they adopted Indian titles, etc. And their inscriptions, etc., are probably in Sanskrit. But they were not Sanskritized, they were Indianized. If you adopt Sanskrit and Hinduism, Buddhism, it means you're Indianized, not Sanskritized, not Brahmanized or Brahminical religion or whatever. Okay? So that's the deal with the Turk Shahis. Himanshu Sharma says, we know Genghis Khan was one of history's most influential rulers, yet his burial site remains undiscovered. Where is his grave believed to be located? Let me tell you where his grave is believed to be located. Okay. Burhan Khaldun, Khan Khenti. Check this out. Khan Khenti. Khan Khenti strictly protected zone area. Okay. So that is the thing. We can take a look at the map. Okay, I don't need to go to the map for that. And there is this great mountain there in the Khan Khenti. Maybe we can take a look at that on the map. Why not? Yeah. So we go to the map, we search for Khan Khenti, strictly protected area where nobody is allowed. Okay. Khan Khenti. Zoom. There we go. So we zoom, we use the satellite image. So this is the Khan Khenti region, strictly protected zone. Huge region, part of Mongolia, north of Ulaanbaatar, south of the Russian part of Mongolia. And if you look at Burhan Khaldun, well, this is the mountain that Genghis Khan, he lived in this region and as a child. And it is believed that his grave, his resting place, is somewhere in this region. And like I said, the Khan Khenti region is a strictly protected region. No one's allowed there. During the Soviet era, when Mongolia was a Soviet vassal, that region was a no-go zone. And even today, access to the region is strictly controlled. And there have been European expeditions to the region who have sought to discover the resting place of Genghis Khan, but nobody has succeeded thus far. So it is believed, before I elaborate further, let me just put this on the record. It is believed that Genghis Khan's grave, burial place, is in the Khan Khenti region, the Burhan Khaldun region, somewhere around that place. Now, how do we know that this is the case? See, when Sri Marco Polo, the Italian traveler, traveled to Mongolia, he was told this nice story that when Genghis Khan died, they brought his body back to his childhood, the place where he lived as a childhood, which is the Burhan Khaldun mountain region. And he was buried there. And after he was buried, the place was trampled over by 1 million horses, apparently. And a river was diverted over the place. So a river flows over the burial place now. And the soldiers who buried him, they were killed. And any traveler who saw what happened was also killed. That's the story that was told to Marco Polo. And this story traveled into Europe. So the Europeans have been fascinated, and the Westerners have been fascinated about finding the burial place. Because apparently, if you find his burial place, then it will have a tremendous amount of wealth and gold and treasure and whatnot. So they crave to discover the resting place of Genghis Khan. Now, what do I make of this, me personally? What I have to say about this is that Genghis Khan's burial place will never be discovered. Never, ever, ever, ever be discovered. It won't. Why do I say this? Because first of all, if you understand Genghis Khan, and I have studied Genghis Khan in great detail for decades, if you understand Genghis Khan, you will understand that he did not care about wealth, first of all. So if he would be buried somewhere, he would not be buried with tremendous amount of wealth or whatever. Secondly, when Genghis Khan's father died, Yesugei, what kind of burial was Yesugei given? He was given what they call a sky burial. Sky burial. I will not Google it and show you the images because not appropriate. What you do in a sky burial is that the person who is dead, who has died, you do whatever prayers, etc. you want to do. You strip the body of all its clothes, you take it to a hill, and you leave it there. And the birds will take care of the rest. That's called a sky burial, very similar to what the Zoroastrians have. The Zoroastrians also have something very similar to this. In Tibet today, they still practice sky burials. Tibet, both the Desha. And I suppose in Mongolia also today, some people may practice sky burials. So when Genghis Khan's father died, he was given, his body was abandoned. But they practiced sky burials. And it is my opinion that Genghis Khan would have preferred to be buried or for his funeral arrangements to follow that procedure. Why? Because he died in what is today China. He was fighting the Chinese, and somehow he died. We're not quite sure how he died. But his last order before dying was to his brothers, go and destroy the kingdom of Shishya. Destroy them. And that's what happened. His order was carried out even after he died. So he was on this campaign in China to reconquer China, because the Chinese had rebelled against him once again. When he went for the conquest of the Khwarazm Empire, to teach them a lesson, the Chinese rebelled, who he had initially conquered. So he went back to China to conquer, to crush the rebellion, and somehow, for whatever reason, he died there. That was a huge distance away from Burhan Khaldun, the Khan Khenti mountain region. So in those days, how do you transport a body over 1,000+ kilometers without it decomposing? It's not. You don't want that to happen. It's not dignified, right? So most likely he would have been given a sky burial wherever he died. That's what I believe. I have no proof, but I have a reasonably deep understanding of Shri Genghis Khan and what kind of person he was. So I don't believe he was buried anywhere in the Khan Khenti region. He would have been given a sky burial, and his spirit would have flown and reconnected with his ancestors. That was the Mongolic belief system. But then why was Marco Polo told this story? Because he was a barbarian from a faraway foreign country, and you don't tell the truth to barbarians. You mislead them. So I believe that Genghis Khan's burial place will never be found, and that's how it should be. Noah's Club says, I'm following you for 2 years, discovered you from Ranveer's podcast. Well, thank you very much. So thank you. Could you please explain the great man theory in detail, and what are their traits? So the great man theory is an ancient, well, not ancient, it's a theory that's been around for the past couple of 100 years. And it says that all major geopolitical events that drive history forward, who is responsible for that? It's typically a few great men. Okay? Let me give you some examples. Alexander the Great. Great man, right? Then you have Julius Caesar, another great man. You have Napoleon, great man. You have Genghis Khan, a great man. If you go back all the way back in Indian history, we have King Sudas, a great man. Before that, or after that, after King Sudas, that great man who fought the battle and won the battle of the 10 kings, 10 plus kings. Then you have Shri Ram, great man. We worship him as an incarnation of Shri Vishnu today. Then you have Shri Krishna, another great man. If you look at more recent Indian history, Vishnugupta Chanakya, Chandragupta Maurya, Ashok, Kanishka, these are the people who drove Indian history, who shaped the course of Indian history. You have a great man who emerged out of Arabia, Prophet Muhammad, who changed the course of world history, didn't he? No question about that. In more recent times, we have Napoleon Bonaparte, who changed the course of European history. We have the Iron Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck. We have the great evil man, Adolf Hitler. We have Stalin. We have Mao Zedong. We have in Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who changed the course of world history. We have the Turkish Sultan Salim II, who took Constantinople and changed world history. So my point is, the theory, the great man theory, says that it is a few great men in world history who shaped the course of world history. It is their leadership and their great traits or whatever that is the factor, the force that shapes the course that the world takes. That is the great man theory. What do I think of this? Well, today there's a lot of criticism that this theory takes, because it says great man, not great person. It doesn't include women. So that's one criticism that has emerged in the 20th and 21st century, that it is a misogynistic theory. Women aren't included. Okay, that's one thing. And apart from that, it says that apparently the great man theory says that leadership traits are people are born with those leadership traits, and leadership isn't learned; it is innate in you, that sort of thing. I don't agree with that at all. In case it is true, because if you look at various leaders like whether it is King Sudas, whether it is Julius Caesar, whether it is Sri Ram, Shri Krishna, whether it is Chandragupta Maurya, whether it is Genghis Khan, whether it is Napoleon, they all were not, they may have had some leadership traits in them when they were born, but it was the events of their early years that shaped them and forged the leader in fire in the fire of trials and tribulations. So leaders, some people may have leadership qualities, they may be born leaders, but then they would never potentially never go through those tribulations and trials that forges a true leader. And maybe lots of leaders simply did not emerge because of that. So the point is, there are some criticisms that are levied at the great man theory, but in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense. The course of world history has always, all major world events, all major geopolitical changes in world history have occurred because of warfare, and what drives warfare is typically what they call great men. I can't think of too many great women. Maybe the world is an evil place. Maybe the world is an evil patriarchal place. It is what it is, right? Who am I to judge that? We don't judge. We just simply observe. We simply observe and we notice the patterns, and then we discuss the patterns. So if you look at the patterns, it's clear that it's been these great men who have shaped the history of the world. And that essentially is the great man theory. You may agree or disagree with it. You may consider it to be a misogynistic theory, whatever, outdated theory. That's entirely up to you. But that's what great man theory is. Okay, let's talk about the Chinese and plagiarism. Ashish Karnashish says Chinese are plagiarizing Indian dresses and cultural items and calling them Persian or from western regions of China because they can't digest India influenced them heavily. How should we Indians deal with this? Same thing with Hindu numerals. I don't know why they add Arabic, the term Arabic, to it, because it was invented in India. Really Now says Chinese use modified Indian clothing, jewelry, and classical dances in so many of their productions, but fiercely deny any Indian origin for them, saying it's Central Asian or Turkic or Persian influence, that even India got this culture from there. They deny Gandhar was literally India and say Pompeii Lakshmi is not Indian. Why? So what are we talking about here? Let me show you. Okay? Give me a second. So here is one example. This is from Twitter or X. Let me first remove this. We have it. So this is Ambassade de Chine of France, which means the Chinese embassy in France. They say that this is a costume from Xinjiang. Please take a look at the costume. Does this look like a costume from China? This is so clearly an Indian costume. The Chinese are claiming it's from Xinjiang. Now, let's take a look at something else. This is a new controversy that has emerged in Twitter, which is good. They are calling this a traditional Chinese clothing from western regions of China. Once again, it's Indian clothing. And I'll not play the video because of whatever copyright thing. But you see, even the dance is Indian, right? It's inspired from India and whatever this other thing is. The Chinese are essentially plagiarizing Indian culture. And that's what we are discussing here, right? So what they claim is that it's either Persian or Central Asian or Turkic. Well, if you just look at the historical record of the kind of dresses Indian ladies used to wear during, let's say, the Gupta period, the Kushan period, the modern period, it's clear that these dresses are of Indian origin. But the Chinese want to claim these. And they claim it's from wherever. Persia. Persian clothing is Islamic clothing the past 1500 or so years. 14, 12, 1300 years. And before that, the Persians did not wear the kind of clothes Indians wear in Persian ladies. So it can't be Persian. Central Asia, The climate is such that you can't wear such clothing in Central Asia. The Turks, for the past at least 1,000 years, they've been Islamicized. They don't wear such clothing. The Arabs, they don't wear such clothing. They wear burqas. So it's clearly Indian clothing. The Chinese are trying to pass off as either Turkic or Central Asian or Persian or Arabic, but not Indian. Right? If you watch the movie Aladdin, there's a movie called Aladdin, a Disney movie. There's this character called Jasmine in that. Okay? Let's take a look at that. Disney Aladdin. Aladdin. 1992 film. Okay, let's take a look at the images. So this is the main character Aladdin, and there is this girl called Jasmine. Jasmine costume. Let's take a look at the costume. So this, oh come on, man. Where's the original? Okay, just look at this. So this is the kind of dress that Jasmine wears. Once again, it is being passed off as an Arabic costume, but Arabic ladies would never wear such a thing. It's unimaginable. Once again, this comes from India. It's inspired by India, but it's passed off as Arabic. So even Hollywood does this. As you can see, this is not an Arabic style of dressing. This may be, but this is not. So the West does it, the Chinese do it, everybody does it, and they get away with it. Why is that? Why does everybody get away with this? Because we don't take ownership of our culture. Take the example of yoga. Yoga has been plagiarized and distorted the world over. The Europeans and the Americans, the West they've taken over yoga and they have distorted it beyond belief. Hot yoga, cold yoga, dog yoga, goat yoga, drunk yoga. I don't even know what are the forms of yoga. It's because we have never bothered to take ownership of yoga. I have been saying this for years. The government of India needs to wake the hell up and establish a global yoga standards institute. A global institute of yoga which will decide what is yoga and what is not yoga. It will decide the standards of yoga. It will play the role that the Shaolin Temple plays for Kung Fu. The Shaolin Temple decides what is Kung Fu and what is not. Not any goddamn thing can be called Kung Fu, right? Similarly, we need to have this in India. But we are not doing it. The government of India is simply not interested. India has become a secular nation which rejects its cultural heritage. Oh, we have established a World Yoga Day. Nice, fantastic, great thing. Beyond that, what? That's so easy. Do a little bit of hard work sometimes, right? And similarly, we need to be very clear about what constitutes Indian culture and what, for example, the dresses. Are these Indian dresses or Chinese dresses? So we need to reclaim our culture. We need to take ownership of our culture. People can keep on doing it, but it can be denied. The moment the government declares something to be Indian heritage, it's very hard for others to fight back against that once we do it officially. But the government of India is simply not concerned. I have no idea what they're doing, and it's incredibly frustrating. It is what it is. There we have it. Okay, a question from a year ago. Was he a hidden Jew? And we're talking about Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. So someone else says it's not clear what he was. He was definitely not a Muslim. He was a Freemason, however. His followers created a cult around him, stealing verses from the Quran and replacing Allah and the prophets with Ataturk. Okay, so the question actually is, who was Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the dictator of Turkey, who saved Turkey from the West? Was he a hidden Jew? Was he a Freemason? Was he something else? Was he not a Muslim? What was he? Was he not Turkish? What was the deal with Mustafa Kemal Ataturk? What we know for sure is that he tried to eradicate Islam from Turkey. His name was Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Kemal comes later. Kemal is an Arabic word which means perfection or perfect. His name was merely Mustafa. He did not have a surname. His father's name was Ali Raza. His mother's name was Zubayda. His sister's name was Makbula. How do I know all this? I've studied Ataturk in detail. So the his name is today called Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. The word Kemal was added by one of his teachers, mathematics teachers, who found that he was brilliant in mathematics. And Ataturk was a title given to him by the people of Turkey after he saved Turkey from the West. Ataturk means the father of the Turks. Now, what's the deal? Was he not Muslim? So look, first of all, if you look at Ataturk, let's take a look at let's Google let's Google him, Ataturk. So if you look at Ataturk when he was young, this is a younger Ataturk. You can see that he has blue eyes. And if you Ataturk, let's see, let's try and search for Ataturk young. So this is a young Ataturk apparently. Oh, I had no idea he could smile. So if you see him as a young man, you will see he looks kind of European. Even in his older age, he looked European. But if you see the color pictures of Ataturk, you will see that he has blue eyes. And why am I searching for young images? Because typically hair color changes as you grow older. When he was young, he had blonde hair. And you can look it up yourself. I'm not going to waste your time looking for the specific images. When he was young, he had blonde hair and blue eyes. Why does a Turk have that? See, Turks, they have Greek and Anatolian ancestry. The Greeks were not necessarily blue-eyed and blonde people. The Greeks typically have dark eyes and hair. So why did Ataturk have blue eyes and blonde hair? His mother, Zubaydah, most likely was Albanian. Okay? Albania is further west in Europe, slightly east of Italy, across the Adriatic. So his mother was Albanian, and from her he probably got, and she had blue eyes and blonde hair. So that's how he got those characteristics. Now, his father was a Turk, clear-cut Turk, and they were all Muslims. Father, mother, both Muslims, as far as is known. When he was young, he was involved in various organizations, something called Union in Progress, something called there was something called Union in Progress. I am not sure if he was ever a Freemason. There are some allegations that are unsupported by known evidence, as far as I know, that he became a Freemason. What I can tell you is that he tried to ban Freemasonry in Turkey in the year 1930 something. Let's Google that as well, shall we? Did Ataturk ban Freemasonry? Okay, while not a direct ban, his government oversaw the closure of Freemason lodges in Turkey in 1935, based on the rationale that their principles were incompatible with the nationalistic policy and in response to external. Okay, so Ataturk did not do a direct ban, but he did close Freemason lodges in Turkey in 1935. So if he was a Freemason, why would he do that? Right? So the Freemasonry angle doesn't seem to be correct. What about the Jewish angle? Some people accuse him of being Jewish. Well, I can tell you his father was Turkish, to the best of my knowledge. You can check it out. And his mother was Albanian, but Muslim. So I don't see a Jewish angle there either. If you see, for a person to be Jewish, their mother has to be Jewish. But I personally have not seen any Jewish angle to his mom, to his mother, Zubaydah. So, there are all these theories that float around on the internet that Ataturk was a Freemason, or he was a Jew or whatever. But I've seen none of that. I've seen evidence. I've not seen any evidence for that. Was he not a Muslim? There could be some truth to that. He tried his best to eradicate Islam from his nation. So you would not do that if you were Muslim, right? So that probably there is truth to that. Beyond that, I can't see anything else. Ayush Singh says, why call a region northeast when it is the far east of India? This shows the leadership of the nation has no ambition of getting over this colonial mentality. Let's take a look at the map of India. What are we talking about? We're talking about what they call Northeast India. Northeast India is these states over here, right? Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Meghalaya, Nagaland, Manipur, Tripura, Mizoram. These are the states that constitute what we call the Northeast. If you look at the geography of India, the north is Ladakh, Kashmir, etc. South is Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Lanka of the subcontinent. West is Gujarat, Sindh, Balochistan. And is east of Bengal. We have these states, right? Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, etc. So it's clearly the far east of India, just like Balochistan is the far west of India. It's not the northeast. How is it north? It's the east. Northeast would be Nepal, possibly. So this should be called the far east of India. So why is it called the northeast of India? Shall I explain why it's called the northeast of India? The British occupiers of India, they first established colonies in what is now Bengal. Okay? They first colonized India from Bengal. So situated in Bengal, if you are sitting in Bengal, then to the northeast of Bengal, you have these states. So sitting in Kolkata or wherever, from there, this place was the northeast of Bengal. That makes sense, because from Bengal, geographically, northeast is this entire region. But eventually the British took over the whole of India. But they had written about these states as the northeast because they were at that time situated in Bengal. But the Indian historians, mentally colonized morons, I would say, continued calling the far east of India the northeast of India. And even today, without even bothering to understand why it was once called northeast, our historians, our politicians, our leaders, our citizens, they keep calling it northeast of India. It is the far east of India. It's a British colonial hangover. That's why we call it the northeast, because the British were initially based only in Bengal. From there, it was in the northeastern direction. We are so mentally colonized. We just blindly keep doing things without understanding why these names and terms exist in the first place. We Indians don't think at all, right? The switch has been turned off, the thinking switch, the switch that asks questions. If this place is called the northeast, why is it called the northeast? Because it is not in the north, it's simply the far east. But no, we will blindly keep on parroting whatever our textbooks and teachers told us, taught us, and that's it. We don't think. Mentally lobotomized, that's what we are. All right. Shubh says, why do North Indians, UP and Bihar, seem more deracinated from their ancestral culture and way of life as compared to South India, Bengal, Maharashtra? The longer you are under foreign occupation and under foreign brutality, the more deracinated you're going to be. Because the foreigners, the Turks, tried to eradicate our culture. They tried to impose their foreign religion and culture on us, didn't they? And they succeeded to some extent. They destroyed all our temples. That's why you have great temples in southern India, but no great temple that is standing intact in northern India. In northern India, you were under Turkic rule for centuries. And Gandhar was the longest under Turkic rule, which is what now it is completely converted. The same thing eventually happened in Kashmir and various parts of northern India, Punjab, Haryana, whatever else. These parts of India were for several centuries under Turkic rule. So the Turkic culture, the Mughal culture, it seeped into our culture in various ways. Why do you have weddings in the night in northern India? Because the Turks practiced something called bride kidnapping, which I've spoken about in Anatolia. They would kidnap young girls who had just got married on their wedding night or wedding day. And so it was necessary to do weddings in a way that the Turks would not notice. That's why you had to do weddings in the middle of the night. And that culture is now our culture, apparently. It was not our original culture. See, so the longer you are under foreign brutality, oppression, occupation, the more deracinated you're gonna be, and that's why we have the situation that we have. Okay, let's. Okay, Bhaskar Bandit says, when did the idea of white skin being superior actually start or originate? Was it from the Anglo-Saxon British Empire? Do we see traces of this earlier in Roman Empire or even before that? Thank you, sir. This notion of white skin being superior, it dates back only about 200-300 years. So the Europeans became dominant in the past 500 years. And eventually, after a couple of centuries, 2-3 centuries, they started believing that their skin tone is racially superior. And anybody who has the skin tone associated with Europeans is naturally superior to other people because they became so dominant because of a variety of reasons. During the Roman times or Greek times, was white skin supposedly superior? The Greeks fought the Persians for centuries. Did the Greeks believe that the Persians were inferior to them because the Persians had darker skin than the Greeks? No. Did Alexander believe that the Indians were inferior to him because Indians had darker skin? No, no such thing. Absolutely nothing. Right? Roman Empire. The Romans, the original Romans, not today's Italians, the original Romans had dark hair and dark eyes. And they had darker skin compared to the Nordic people and the Celtic peoples. Okay? Then you have the conquest of Gaul and the conquest of various other parts of Europe. When this happens, the Romans start bringing in large numbers of slaves from these parts of Europe which they had subjugated. So when you bring in slaves, women slaves, let's say, from the Celtic parts of Europe, etc., most of those women and people will have blonde hair. And those were enslaved. And when the Romans enslaved women, they did all kinds of terrible things to them because slaves are just property, right? So the Romans, they passed a law. What was the law? All prostitutes in Rome had to either wear a blonde wig or to dye their hair blonde because Roman women could not be prostitutes. Or if they had to be prostitutes, they had to dye their hair blonde or wear a blonde wig. Because blonde hair was a mark of the non-Romans, the white people. The Romans they had darker skin tones than the Northern Europeans, the Celts. So did the Romans believe that the Northern Europeans who had whiter skin than them and blonde hair, blue eyes, did the Romans think that was superior to them? No. They believed Romans were superior to the white people, to the whiter people. You see? And you can fact check whatever I've just said. Check it out. Google it or whatever it. So the idea of white skin being superior originated pretty recently, maybe 200-300 years, the past 200-300 years. The Irish were discriminated against for a very long time in North America. The Irish have whiter skin than the British, right? But they were discriminated against. They were considered non-white or racially inferior for a long time. And to get rid of that, the Irish had to be super racist against the blacks. And that's how they were accepted as whites. Long story, pretty dark stories here. So the entire thing of white skin being superior, it emerges in the past 200 or 300 years, roughly. Krishna of the Surinamese Netherlands says, after finding the Sanauli chariot, when are we going to find the Kurukshetra chariots? So we have discovered a chariot or chariots, at least one chariot in Sanauli. What about Kurukshetra? Well, I suppose there could be chariots buried in the Kurukshetra region. But how will we find those chariots if we don't do an archaeological dig in Kurukshetra? What about Indraprastha? Indraprastha is in Delhi. But do we do anything there? Has any archaeological expedition or dig or project happened there? No. That's the problem in India. Our entire history is buried under the ground, and the ASI doesn't bother to do a thing about it. I mean, if you look at the Paleo Channel, the dry riverbed of the Saraswati, along the banks of the dry riverbed, you have at least 2,000 known but unexplored archaeological sites. When are we going to start exploring those? Imagine the amount of new information that will emerge if we do that. We have Rakhi Gadi. We have a couple of sites, Kalibangan, Rakhi Gadi, Dholavira, Lothal, 4-5 places that we keep on talking about. What about Dwarka, which is lying offshore under the ocean? When are we going to start exploring that archaeologically in a serious way? When? Do we even care? I mean, we care, we people, but what is the government doing? What is the ASI doing? I'm not sure what. So, unless this is taken up in a serious manner, nothing's going to be found. Sonali was an accident. We just stumbled upon the chariot. If we start looking properly using various, modern technologies like LIDAR and whatnot, so much more will emerge. But why waste money on that when you can use money somewhere else? Okay. Let's take a couple more questions. Let's take this one. Shubh says Meiji Restoration in 1868 rejected the dharmic way of life and made Japan move towards westernization. And the result was absolutely horrific. Yes, we know. Japanese soldiers became absolutely barbaric, brutal. We know that, yes. India is also going forward in that same direction gradually. What are my thoughts? Well, we aren't wholesale rejecting Indian culture the way the Meiji Restoration did. See, the Meiji Restoration was brutal in so many different ways. Japan for 1,000 years was a vegetarian society. The samurais, the warriors, the kshatriyas of Japan, they were also vegetarian, but they ate fish, seafood, like the people of Manipur or the people of Bengal today, who claim to be vegetarian, but they can eat fish. So fish was like vegetarian food for them. So the samurai, the great warriors, were almost vegetarian, but they ate fish. And the rest of the people of Japan, they were completely vegetarian. Cow slaughter was taboo. So what did the Meiji Restoration do? The bureaucrats who carried out the Meiji Restoration, the coup, they made the king of Japan, the Meiji emperor, consume beef, so that it is no longer a taboo. If the god emperor does it, the people can do it. And that's the kind of thing it was. So in India, we don't have that extreme level of very rapid, very radical cultural extermination of our culture. That's not happening. It's happening gradually. But if it continues in the direction, we also may go in the along similar paths. Who knows? Yeah, because we are today gradually deracinating ourselves. The education system deracinates Indians. The textbooks, the teachers, they do that. The media does it. The news and the entertainment industry does it. Government does it in a variety of indirect ways, knowingly or unknowingly. So eventually we will also go in the direction, which is terrible if it happens. So I hope we change course, we course correct, and we return to our civilizational roots. That's what needs to happen, ideally. Sunmoon08 says, why don't we have our own type of beauty standards? Like in ancient times, having mustache was a form of masculinity. Now it's considered unhygienic because the current Indian beauty standards are Korean K-pop standards. We always follow the West in our or other countries. See, India, I keep referring to India as a civilization, right? But a civilization, one of the characteristics it has is that it's a net exporter of culture. Today, India is a wholesale importer of culture because of the inferiority complex we have been saddled with, or people have been saddled with, and that sort of thing. So we are now an importer of culture. We copy trends that come from the West or from the East or whatever. K-pop. What is K-pop? I don't get it. You don't even understand the language. So Indians are deracinated. Indians have this inferiority complex, massive inferiority complex, which is why Indians want to absorb and ape, like monkeys, everything that comes from abroad, from any nation that is, financially more prosperous than ours. So it's a terrible thing, right? We should have our own standards. We should once again become a net exporter of culture. But for that, we have to become more prosperous. And the government needs to reinvest in Indian culture and civilization, which it is not doing right now. So that's the deal. And let's take one last question by Swapnil. How did the resettlement of freed African American and Caribbean slaves shape the founding and development of Liberia and Sierra Leone in the 19th century? Okay, first of all, what part of the world is this? Let us figure it out. Let's go to the map. So we're talking about Western Africa, Southwestern Africa. Okay. So we have this small nation here called Sierra Leone, whose capital is Freetown. And we have this nation called Liberia, which is to the east of Sierra Leone, whose capital is Monrovia, or the largest city is Monrovia. Now, what is the deal with these two nations, Liberia and Sierra Leone? So Sierra Leone was founded by freed slaves from the Caribbean region in the late 18th century. And Liberia was founded by freed slaves from the United States in the early 19th century. And so what happened? What was the outcome of this? So in both nations, the people who migrated, the freed slaves who came from the Caribbean in the case of Sierra Leone, and the freed slaves who came from the United States in the case of Liberia, these people who came from North America and the Caribbean, they became the dominant society, the dominant community in these two countries. But these two countries had natives who lived there. Those were completely sidelined and marginalized and oppressed. So the freed slaves come and oppress and kind of enslave the natives of the land. Imagine that. Yeah. So what were the consequences of this? Eventually disaster. So in Liberia, you had this, I forget the name of the political party, which was the political party of the freed slaves. They dominated Liberia until about 1980, when there was a coup. And a fine gentleman called Samuel Doe, assassinated William Talbot, or whoever his name was, and became the dictator of Liberia. And then, about 8-9 years ago, he was himself assassinated in a very nasty way by someone called Charles Taylor. So Samuel Doe was a native who assassinated one of the descendants of the freed slaves, and he himself was assassinated in a very brutal way by somebody called Charles Taylor. And this led to a civil war which spilled over into Sierra Leone. And this went on for years, and it's been a pretty horrific period of time. And I would highly recommend, do not search for images of the Liberian Civil War and Sierra Leone Civil War on Google Images. Do not search for that. Horrific. So the resettlement of these freed African American and Caribbean slaves, it destabilized the part of Africa where they were settled, because they themselves became the oppressors. They were like, we are superior. We came from North America or wherever, and we are Christians, and we are European in values, and we are better than you black Africans because we have some amount of white blood, perhaps. That sort of thing. Imagine that. So it destabilized these places. And the outcome of that has been absolute horror. And these are some of the poorest countries in the world. Yeah, so it did not work out very well, this experiment. Okay, that brings me to the end of today's questions. Now let's take a few questions from the live chat. All right, let us do that. What do we have? Do we have any questions? Sukoon Vacher says, can you tell us about the Kailash Temple at Ellora? How big of an engineering achievement it was for ancient Indians? I am not any kind of expert in this, so I can't say. Oh, I see that we have some super chats. So about the Kailash Temple, I am not aware of the details. I'm aware of the fact that it's a monolithic temple, a rock cut temple, carved out of a single hill or mountain, and it must have taken an incredible amount of time and effort and expenditure to make it, but I don't know about the specifications in detail. We have super chats. Please, first of all, stop taking super chats because I have run past the 2 hour limit. Okay. Bhaskar Bandit says, when did the idea of white skin being superior start? I just took this question a while ago. So there we have it. Anyway, thank you for the question. Bhaskar Bandit once again says, the West is hell-bent on showing Shri Genghis Khan as a barbarian. If Alexander the Greek was very civilized in his travels, is it only because they can't digest somebody in the East had a bigger empire? Yes, of course. See, today the West dominates the world, and they seek to downplay the achievements of all non-Western peoples, kingdoms, cultures, civilizations, empires, especially non-white entities. Genghis Khan, one man, conquered half the known world of his time. He conquered half of Eurasia. He himself did not conquer half of Eurasia, maybe at least more than a third of Eurasia, but eventually the Mongol Empire encompassed half of Eurasia, essentially. Right? And was Genghis Khan a barbarian? So he is portrayed as a great mass murderer or whatever. If you compare Genghis Khan with Timur, if you look at the amount of land Genghis Khan conquered and the alleged death toll, and if you divide the death toll by the land in square kilometers, then Genghis Khan killed way less people per square kilometer than Timur. But nobody says that about Timur. And I'm not sure about Alexander. We don't even know how many people he killed, but he was pretty brutal and extremely cruel. And I've spoken about this in detail. What he did in Tyre, what he did in Thebes, absolute brutal, cruel behavior. And what he did in India, in Western India, he burned entire villages alive. So much more. Alexander was a barbarian, and he was motivated by personal glory. He was a robber on a vast scale. That's what Alexander was. Genghis Khan was not that. So why is the West hell-bent on showing Genghis Khan like this? Because he was not white. Because he was not Christian. You see? That's why. MK says, enlighten us about the theft of Indian art, fashion, textiles, beauty, handicrafts, mathematics, pharmaceuticals, pharmacology, toxicology, etc. by the West. Why are soul vultures relatively less successful in North? How many questions do you have, sir? Look, I have discussed this in so many episodes. And I took the question of the plagiarism by the Chinese and the West today as well. So I have kind of covered this. But you have given so many different data points, Indian art, fashion, textiles, beauty, handicrafts, and so on. It will take like at least an hour to discuss this in detail. But yeah, all of that has been stolen, plagiarized, absorbed, digested, and it is now being repackaged as Western inventions. For example, we have something called pranayam. Now they call it cardiac coherence breathing, as if they invented this thing. They came up with this new thing. There is, Indian sadhus, Indian sadhus, etc. They have been known for thousands of years to spend years in the Himalayas, wearing very little clothing, and they can take the cold of the Himalayas, right? Today, there's this guy called Wim Hof who has taken that cold exposure thing from our sadhus, and he's also taken the Kapala Bhatti or Bhastrika methodology from pranayam, and he's combined that into the Wim Hof method. It is nothing but the Wim Hof method of cultural theft. So there are so many examples of this. The Chinese are also doing it, and one can discuss this in great detail. WBR says, historically, has any currency been as dominant as the US dollar aside from gold? What are the reasons for the dominance of a particular currency in the world? No currency has been globally as dominant as the US dollar, aside from gold. What are the reasons for the dominance of the US dollar? The US's military might and global power projection capabilities. Okay? They can intervene militarily anywhere on the surface of the planet at about 60 minutes notice. And they have more than 700, 800 extraterritorial military bases all across the world. When they have that sort of global power projection capability and the world's strongest military, they can use that to enforce the US dollar as the global reserve currency. And that's why it is the case. CS19J him says, I've been watching your show for a very long time. My question is, why are people in North morphologically different than people in South India, even though the genetics are almost the same? Genetics almost the same. People in Northern India look kind of different from people in Southern India. Let me give you a very simple contrasting example. Imran Khan, the Pakistani cricketer who's in jail now, Prime Minister, and Muttiah Muralidharan, the Sri Lankan cricketer, Tamil cricketer, they will have very similar genetics, but they look very different. Why is that? Because see, today we have to look at the world not from today's lens. Today, if I want to go from Tamil Nadu to Delhi or Kabul, I can do that in 4 hours, take a flight and go there. So we imagine that we can travel very easily all across India. And why are people different? In the past, people had to travel by foot. To travel from southern India to Kabul, Gandhar, would take several, I don't know, a couple of years. Right? And that's only in the past, maybe 5-10,000 years. Before that, the subcontinent was full of forests and people were isolated wherever they were. So people who lived in southern India would have communication contacts to some extent with the rest of India in some way, but they would not travel, migrate, intermarry, all of that. So people who lived in different parts of India, they, because of the different climates, because of the different amount of sun exposure, they developed different skin tones and so much more. And that's why morphologically they are different, because this was the case for thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands of years. So people in the Yamuna Valley, Ganga Valley, who lived there 30,000 years ago, their descendants would stay there most likely for another 10-20,000 years without going elsewhere, because it was so fertile. So you don't need to go elsewhere. And because there are forests everywhere, jungles with tigers, you had hundreds of thousands of tigers in India, and bears and pythons and whatnot. You don't travel, you stay where you are. So even though we all originated from the same population group, we spread across the subcontinent, and for tens of thousands of years, different population groups evolved in different ways, and that's why we have this difference in morphology. James says you could send 10,000 Europeans in Antarctica, and after 100 years, there would be people trying to seek asylum. You need class. Look at Australia, etc. Australia is a great case study of European colonization. It is said that you send Europeans to a certain part of the world for 100 years, and they will completely transform it. They will turn a barren place into a first world country. Take the example of Australia, or the United States, or Canada, or any of these countries that the Europeans colonized. Well, I'll tell you what. To do that in Australia, they first had to genocide the natives. They had to classify the natives as flora and fauna. Yeah? Would you like me to show you something, James? James, first of all, I appreciate you. Let me repeat that. Okay, so Australian Aborigines in chains. So check this out. They won't show it. Why is this safe search nonsense on? View image. Check it out. Check it out. Check it out. Check it out. So this is how they treated Australians, the natives. They were treated like animals. You had to first eradicate the natives, marginalize them, diminish their population, push them to the fringes, and then you could take over the nice parts of Australia and build cities there. When it comes to the Americas, they had to wipe out 100 million natives to build these beautiful countries. A country built on the genocide of the natives and the slavery of the Africans. So yes, once you do that, once you ethnically cleanse your land, the land you have occupied, then you can build a first world country over the bones of the dead, I suppose. Right? James, thank you. Appreciate you. MK says, who were more brutal, barbaric, Arabs or Turks? Look, how do you quantify brutality? The Turks learned it from the Arabs, I would say. The original Arabs. I would say both were in different ways, equally brutal in different ways. For us, it's the Turks. For the Iranians, it's the Turks more than the Arabs. But the Arabs were the first to brutalize the Persians, weren't they? So different, but similar. Kevin says, keep up the great work, Abhijit. God bless. Much love. Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you so much. God bless you too as well. Thank you so much for your support. Akhil Saini says, I don't like what the caste system has turned out to be. I want to know more about Saini and Shur Saini. Was Porus a Saini or a Jat? Look, sir, I have no idea. I don't know about the Saini or Surasaini, etc. lineages. There are so many of these. There are tens of thousands of lineages in India, all ancient lineages going back all the way to the Vedic times, right? And it was not the caste system; it was the Jati Varna system. And today, the caste system has become this oppressive thing. But this was institutionalized by the British. And the government of India, after 47, continued this nonsense. If caste system is so bad, why don't you simply abolish caste? Abolish all caste divisions. Don't give reservations on the basis of caste, right? Give reservations on the basis of financial status. Isn't that simple? But the politicians, they benefit from the reservations and the caste politics, right? You have to completely abolish caste if you really believe in that. So my point is, we had a Varna Jati system which was incredibly complex, and the British could not understand it because they did not have the brains for that. So they decided to divide India into 4 castes, and they forced Indians to choose what caste you were part of. That sort of thing. But I don't know about whether Porus was a Saini or a Jat. Saini, I mean Jat. The term Jat did not exist during the time of Porus. Right? It's like saying that Buddha was Nepalese. Nepal, the concept of Nepal did not exist 2,500 years ago. So please understand that the past was a different time. You cannot retrofit today's classifications into the past. You can't. Amisha says, Indian king wear is sign of royalty, turbans or crown. The concept of crowns, I don't think it's native to India. Turbans, I don't think it's a sign of royalty either. Lots of different Jati Varnas wear turbans. So it's not a sign of royalty, the turban. And crowns were never part of Indian culture as far as I understand. It's a Western thing. So what did Indian kings have as a sign of royalty? I suppose they would carry weapons, but the Kshatriyas carry weapons, right? Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure what was a sign of royalty. I don't think the crown was an Indian thing. Turbans, lots of different groups of people wear turbans. There must have been something, but we have lost the records of those times, right? What did Chandragupta Maurya wear that others did not wear? I'm not sure. If you look at the coinage of Kanishka, he doesn't wear a crown. I suppose you were king because you were king, and you do not have to wear something special to tell the people that I am superior to you. And your soldiers and your power, that made you superior, and that made you the ruler. And you were not someone who ruled, you were someone who served. That was the dharmic way of ruling. Right. UMX Glow ha 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 says, maybe Indians crave other cultures because Bollywood, which is apparently supposed to be our culture, is terrible propaganda. What's the solution? You see, what passes is Indian culture today. If you look at Hollywood, they think that Indian culture is Bollywood dance. Bollywood dance is not Indian culture. It is, I don't have a polite word to term what Bollywood dance is. Bollywood music sounds sometimes more West Asian, Middle Eastern than Indian music. So Bollywood has played a big role in brainwashing Indians. And Indians, for the longest time, were starved of entertainment. So they just absorbed whatever nonsense comes from Bollywood. And today, Indians play these Bollywood songs even during festivals. What is the solution? The solution is the democratization of culture. Today, you can see, if you're a singer, if you're a musician, if you're an artist, you don't need a record label, you don't need a big producer to put your work in front of the people of India, right? Or the world. You can simply make a YouTube video of your song, or whatever it is that you're doing. And I think that is going to be the solution. But is it too late? Are all Indian artists already infected with this mind virus? I'm not sure. The solution is the democratization of content creation. So that could be a solution, but it's possible that it's already too late, because most Indian creators, artists, etc., are brainwashed. They have been infected with this Bollywood virus. But I think there is still hope, and hopefully that will be the solution. Okay, UMX go. When is another episode of Delulu Indians Believe in coming? Delusions Indians Believe in coming. Would you like one? I could make an extended version of that, perhaps. I could do that. Let me know. All right, that brings me to the end of today's live stream. Thank you very much. This was great fun, as always. Let's see. Let's take one last question. Neeraj Desai says, why does Sanskrit have so many words for the same things like Surya, Ravi, etc.? What was the reason for this? Was this just for poetic purposes? It's because Sanskrit is so old. There must be 100 different words for snow in Sanskrit. There must be 100 words for love in Sanskrit. Vatsalya, Sneha, Prema. Just three I can think of. There must be so many more. Sanskrit is so old that it has so many synonyms. For example, we have the word Ratri for night, but an older word for the same Ratri in the Vedas is Nakta. Nakta. That's the older word for night. Nakta in Vedic Sanskrit, Nacht in German, night in English. So it's the world's oldest language that we know of. And it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. That's why we have so Nisha. Mahita says, Nisha. Thank you, ma'am. Great example, Nisha. So it's so old, and that's why we have so many synonyms. All right, people, thank you so much for the questions. I really enjoyed this. I got you all asked so many great questions in the comments. I could not take them all, but keep doing it. Why are we doing these history live streams? Because history is the foundation of the world. We have to understand history if you want to understand the way the world is and the direction in which it is going. History, the study of history, shows us the patterns and regularities in history. History is cyclical. So to understand today, we have to study history. And that's why I keep doing these history live streams. Thank you so much for the questions, for your viewership, for everything. And tomorrow we're going to have a geopolitics live stream, a super chat live stream. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep raising your standards. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.